zoning ordinance in East Point. And seeing as the event hall is considered an assembly hall and that requires a special land use permit, the applicant seeks a special land use permit, and also we are hosting a public hearing to discuss the project. Do you want me to continue to present the motion? Okay, so the project, we find that the project supports all of the special land use criteria as we previously used to assess other event halls within the city. The Planning Commission has seen 3 so far within the past, I think, 3 months. So we find that this project, again, fits all of the existing criteria as specified in the zoning ordinance. However, the applicant does need to provide sufficient parking. They do lack a certain quantity of spaces in order to meet the zoning ordinance requirements. So the applicant is pursuing a shared parking agreement with adjacent property owners. The applicant is supposed to be here today to represent the shared parking agreement, and their attempts to do so, but I do not see them present. As far as the site plan goes, the applicant also meets all of the site plan requirements as the zoning ordinance outlines, except for, as I mentioned, parking. The site is deficient of, how many spaces did I say? 11 parking spaces.
Well, since the applicant is not here, we have somebody coming in, so I don't know. Is this the applicant?
Do you want me to look?
Please.
Sure, probably. Yeah. On a nice Sunday.
Hey, Deonda, welcome. How are you doing today? Good to see you. Love your dress. So we're actually here discussing your project right now. If you'd like to approach the podium and give an introduction about yourself, your business.
Hello, everyone. I apologize for my tardiness. My name is Deonda Easley. I'm the owner of Epic Entertainment Team. I'm an event planner. Epic Entertainment Team is an event planning business that I started with my 8 children 5 years ago. What we're looking to do is to start an event space on Gratiot, and I apologize. Excuse me, I have to breathe. We're looking to start an event space on Gratiot at the corner of 9 Mile and Tepper. What we're looking to do there is host baby showers, repasses, meetings, business meetings, local. We're opening our space up to the community to host events, and small events are what our target is. Sorry, I don't know what else I'm supposed to say.
Do you have anything else to add?
No. I know we were just discussing your attempts to enter a shared parking agreement.
That is
with
correct.
neighboring property owners or properties across the street.
I did. I wasn't as successful with the shared parking agreement because the veterinary. It was really been hard to contact the owner of the veterinary hospital, which is right across the street. The hospital, as well as the building that we're interested in, has 12 public parking spaces at both that building and the veterinary clinic. I've reached out to the owner, which is he's really hard to catch up with because he has additional parking spaces on the right side of his building. I went to the buildings that are across the street, and again, they were all kind of like, this is all public, you can park here, kind of. They didn't really want to sign the shared parking agreement because they felt that it was public parking. But I did introduce myself as well as the owner of the building that I would be leasing from. He went with me to meet the other business owners. So I'm looking forward to working with them and, being a great business owner with them as well. But I did have a hard time getting the shared parking agreement because they were kind of like, it's public parking. That's the answer that I have gotten. But again, I do know that there are 12 spaces at both buildings, which is a total of 24 spaces. And those are at the immediate buildings. Now, the buildings that are across the street, there are additional parking there as well as the buildings to the left. The buildings that are directly to the immediate left, they seem to be empty buildings. Next to it is a hair shop, and then there's a gas station. But the buildings, again, to the immediate left, they seem to be empty.
Did you write your name on the piece of paper there, please?
No, I
Yeah,
can't.
yes, please, just your name, and do we need an address, or just name is sufficient?
Okay.
Can I ask a question at this time? And this is maybe a better question for, our representative from the panel, but, what is the building that's at 9 Mile in Rosalind? It looks like they share quite a bit of parking between them and the veterinary hospital.
That's the auto center.
I have it on the screen to facilitate.
Were you able to talk to the All Points Auto Service as well?
I did not. I went to the buildings, I stopped at the veterinary, and then I went to the left and across the street.
If my recollection is correct, we had allowed the All Points to do that parking area because he had a lot of cars left over, and I believe that was something that came before us that we approved. So he put his own money and asphalt and put his own lot in there, more of as to house cars as they're going in and out of the facilities.
I was just wondering, since it's on the same side of the street, and just, one building over, if that might be a viable option for you to pursue for shared parking.
Now, the only thing that I was a little bit confused about, because they would share with the animal hospital, and I figured to get with them first,
Right.
but I've been having a hard time getting with them, so I didn't want to go past, I didn't want to bypass them. Like, I want to start on good terms with all the business owners in the area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and having to cross 9 Mile to go isn't very safe. There's not even a light over there.
That's correct. That's why I say on the side that we're on, there's 12, and I'm sorry, there's 12 spaces to the right, and there's 12 spaces to the left. Those are both considered public parking, which the animal hospital did tell me that. They said that, they're like, well, you have public parking there. So I asked them about the other side of the building, and they said the owner would contact me. I've been there, as well as the owner of the building that I'm looking to lease. He went with me to try to talk to the owner. So, we went twice. We went twice together, and then I went again on my own, and he hasn't gotten back to me, no.
And what's the expected capacity of the event space?
I am looking for 60.
I'm not sure who to ask of this question, but when we say they're public parking spots, who owns those lots? Who owns that? City of East Point? Is it really public, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, Chair?
That's true.
If I may. Okay. Yes, the city of East Point owns this property. The spaces you can see in front of you are not owned by any private property owner. And I'd also like to add that we did not focus on any of the street parking, but you can see, as everyone knows, this is also public parking as well. Residential streets are publicly owned and therefore public parking opportunities.
So what I'm looking at here, so you're saying where the cars are to the left is owned by the city.
Left and right, Chair.
Left and right.
24
sir.
spaces of
Both.
public parking.
If the city owns those spots, first off, they need to be striped better, first off. If we own the spots, then we need to be doing a better job of maintaining parking that we have no business owning, as well as the grass coming through everything. So that's a side note. I apologize for that digression there. I love the concept. I hate the location, quite frankly.
Really?
And here's my issue. We have worked very hard to make 9 Mile into a destination. Now, if you told me you wanted to open a coffee shop or a little brewery or something like that, something that people are going to go to from 10 to 8 at night consistently, not for 3 or 4 hours short bursts of time. My concern is does it fall into the vision of the master plan, making 9 Mile a walkable, friendly, where people can go in and out of shops type thing, go shopping, have a cocktail, whatever. I guess my question then to our planner is, do we feel that it falls within the spirit of the master plan and what the vision for 9 Mile is?
Okay, Chair, if I may. Okay. So this project, I'll start off by saying special land uses are subjective. So special land use reviews are subjective. Like you can see the criteria in the packet in front of you. Is it harmonious with the master plan? Is it harmonious with existing character? Is it an improvement to the community? These are more subjective answers, and that's open for consideration and conversation today. We can have a conversation about our different perspectives on this, but staff's role is to provide a balanced perspective and also consider how we've treated these uses previously in the same zoning districts and treat each applicant the same as we've been doing. But that doesn't mean that we can't improve our analysis and our discussion ever. So as we see it now, staff's comments are that an event hall is considered a regional commercial use. So in number 1 it's harmonious to the master plan. Event halls we've been considering through our time here together are more regional commercial uses because they attract customers from not only the neighborhood but the general region. And 9 Mile is zoned for a regional commercial use, and it's also planned to be a regional commercial use as it states in the master plan. However, we are working on rewriting our zoning ordinance and changing our future land use map and designations. So perspectives are constantly changing here. So we can have a conversation if that fits the viewpoint of our future desire to plan for a 9 Mile corridor. But as it states right now, this is the review, this is the conversation we're having. One other item is that it is activating a vacant space.
I wanted to make a comment, kind of we can back up to the parking. I don't know if we resolved that before we go into the master plan. Just seeing the parking on each side, and it includes a street crossing. Is there any parking behind the structure?
There is.
And on the left of the structure that may give you that may be a better chance of getting the owner to sign off on something, so you're at least on the same side of the street for safety?
So there are 9 additional parking spaces behind, and again, there are 2 buildings that are connected directly to that building. My arm's a little short, but if you can see the 2 buildings there, they seem to be
Can
empty.
you zoom in on that?
Okay.
Anybody?
Mara, can we make the image bigger so we can see the buildings?
Yeah, I was just curious, there was
Sure.
parking on the other side of the 2. I know there's all attached buildings.
Yeah, so
I
the
was
two,
trying to see if there was parking. I was hoping it might be.
there
Chair,
are,
is
there
that what you're-
are parking spaces
Make it
behind the
bigger.
2. And the hair studio is not where clients come, they come in to purchase here, so they won't have clients to come and stay. So there are 9 spaces right behind the building. I tried to reach out to these 2, but they seem to be empty, like no one is ever there. Like there's
Is
never.
that the hair studio?
No, the hair studio seems to be open. I did talk to someone, she said she wasn't the owner, but she did let us know, she did let me know that their clients are usually in and out.
Yeah,
Like they don't
purchasing.
have clients that park or stay, so those spaces behind are vacant and open.
And do we know her business hours of operation?
Yes,
In
she said-
adjunction to yours?
She said she's open from 10 to 5,
Okay.
and that's Monday through Saturday. She's not open on Sundays.
Thank you.
I also, if I may, I've spoken to the dumpster company. I've already signed for a dumpster to come behind, as well as get an enclosure. And the front of the building, there's a small area we're looking to plant, bushes there and get a sign. I talked to Signs by Tomorrow. They'll put a sign in the front just to make, it's lighting already, so just to make it look really nice. As an event owner, it's important to me location. So what I liked about this location is close to the expressway. 9 Mile is a major road, so that people can see. If we have it lit up and have it pretty in the front, people can see that our space is a nice space that's open to the community. And back there is where the additional parking spaces are. The 2 buildings right where that car is parked, no one occupies those buildings. And if those buildings are up, I would like to be considered to lease those buildings as well. But I know that's something that we can address, further down the line. But right now, those buildings seem to be empty.
Does anybody have any other questions?
I do, just because I can't remember offhand. When do we have to give the notice to the public on this?
I believe it was already given.
Chair? Public's already been noticed according to Michigan Planning Enabling Act laws.
Oh, I didn't see the copy of it, so that's why I wasn't sure.
Okay. Chair, do you want me to include the public notice in your meeting package?
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
And also the application.
And the application?
Yes.
Okay.
And we didn't have any feedback from any neighbors if there would be parking on the residential street?
None that I can report from the planning department.
So my question is.
Were there letters too?
Go on.
The whole project has been notified per Michigan Planning Enabling Act law. So yes, all letters have been noticed and the public has been noticed through the newspaper as well.
And no feedback.
No.
It's the norm. Sadly, it's the norm.
Thank you.
Mr. Albright, given the situation that we have no firm parking agreements in hand, would we think that it would be reasonable to table this until we have further development on parking
Point
agreements?
of order, Mr. Chair, you're supposed to be having a public hearing, not taking action. That comes later in new business.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I know that the commission's kind of blending the public hearing portion with the actual agenda item, but that would be more appropriate when we get down to the new business portion of it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. It looks like based on the square footage, there needs to be 31 parking spaces plus 2 for employees. And I think there should be 1 more for the caterer, who's also needs to park their vehicle somewhere. So I think there should be 34 spots. Does that make sense?
Chair. The zoning ordinance requires this amount of parking and 2 per employees. It does not designate any requirement for additional caterers.
Okay, is it 2 employees, or regardless, you could have 6 employees working there, but the
It's
zoning
1 parking
ordinance says
space
2.
per employee.
Okay, all right, thank you for the clarification on that. I have a question for the applicant.
Yes, sir.
So, when you first started talking about what type of events you're going to be planning, you talked about everything that I think of as a day event, but yet you have posted here, I believe you're open till 9 or midnight?
I put midnight.
What?
I put midnight because after coming to the public meeting before, I heard that, they seem to be okay with the buildings open past midnight open before midnight without the noise violation. So I just put midnight. But most of my events are will be day events.
I really don't have an issue with it, and I like how the back part of the building, the back part is storage.
I love that.
So if there is music, for instance, in the venue, it probably wouldn't carry out through the back to the residents of the north quite as much as if that, that was part of the event area open to your pages. So
I would have to agree
did
with
like
you.
that.
The storage is one of the things that sold me as well. Having to have a building and have storage space, I thought that was amazing. the location. So it was quite a few things that sold me to bring my business to the city.
I think those are my comments. I would say, to the point about the fact that public streets can be used for parking, if we're talking about a major difference between the number of parking spots that the applicant has, a major difference between the number of parking spots that she has and then the number of guests that would show up, then you do have people parking down that street. And I don't think that's good planning to sit there and just, make an assumption that, hey, 10 cars can park out down this street every day. We kind of have that with some of our auto repair places, and it's terrible. Frankly, they park their cars there all day, every day. So for me personally, I don't think that is, that doesn't reflect well on how I feel about the parking situation. And I agree that, parking across the street, especially if it's gonna be open later, but I think parking across 9 Mile Road, a 5-lane road, is a recipe for a problem. And actually, we've actually had a bigger issue, or we've had an issue with some of the other places that had parking across lesser roads. So parking across the road is, for me, problematic, that type of road, so.
May I speak? So the 24 spaces, the 12 on the building that I would be leasing, and the 12 across that are the public space, and that's 24. The 9 that are behind it almost make the 34 that you said are required for the building. Across 9 Mile, although it's public, that's like Plan BC, as well as down the street. Those are like Plan BC, after those spaces are filled. So it was just like I wanted to make sure that, kind of like I dotted my I's, crossed my T's, I wanted to make sure that we had those options.
Yeah.
But the first option would be the 12 spaces to the left, the 12 spaces to the right, and the spaces that are immediately behind the building that are all public parking.
Yeah, and so I would agree with exactly what you said, and I think the 12 to the left and right are really intuitive for anybody that's going to show up. If you were to get to the point where you could lock in those other 9 parking spots, though, how would you advise your patrons? Don't park down the street, don't park across the street, park behind the backside of the building. How would you advise them?
I am absolutely open to signs. I can leave a sign visible, no parking on the street. And I'm actually open to any suggestions you may have. That I know of, I would think of a sign.
Okay.
But if there's something else that I'm definitely open for it.
Well, I think part of, and this gets a little beyond what we're talking about, but I think the other thing you can do is you sign the agreement with whoever's going to rent the space. I'm sure they're signing an order form.
That's correct.
Part of the order form can be that type of language.
Okay.
Yes, Chief?
Chair, if I may. Ma'am,
Yes.
what is the usable square footage where you would have patrons? And you talked about storage being in the back. Where are the actual tables and chairs? How big is that space?
So that space, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me. That space was, I believe it was 2,300 square feet.
So that space alone is 2,300?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be 154 personnel or people. However, it's not a suppressed building, so you limit it to 100 people. So,
Yeah, we 100% will not go over 100 people. Like, there's no event that I do that requires 100 people.
I have a question for the city. I'm still in amazement that we own these parking spots. So would that be considered municipal parking?
If it's public property, it's within the city right of way, then yes, it's public parking.
So there's absolutely no way that we can say that those spots can only be used by Ms. Easley. So if somebody on the street is having a party and they need more parking spaces, they have every right to using those spaces.
Anybody can use those spaces.
So in my mind, I'm looking at these spaces as two X factors that you really can't, I have a hard time taking those into account because anybody can use the spots. It's not like you owned or leased the land and you had every right to those spots, and you could put a sign up stating, you know, for event parking only. You can't do that because the city owns it.
Anybody could use those spots, you cannot use them to the exclusion of anybody else, but if someone was patronizing a particular business, they have the right to park.
Were the neighbors behind the buildings, if they needed extra parking, could they use them too?
If they were patronizing one of the businesses in that area, yes, I don't know as if they could just, they might be subject to overnight parking limitations, depending on what the limitations are in that area, but anybody would be able to use those spots.
Commissioner Shefsky?
Thanks, Chair. So we're talking a lot about parking in this business, and as we mentioned, business is 2,000 usable square feet, and that seems like it would be that amount for any business that comes in, like you mentioned earlier, a coffee shop. So this property could be considered challenging for business owners to open up because of this requirement in parking. And I know we did an analysis of parking in the DDA, but we have not performed an analysis of parking along 9 Mile to see if our requirements are actually true to what the demand is in that area. A lot of the time, zoning ordinances are written with arbitrary parking requirements. These parking requirements are not based off science. They're pulled from the International Transportation something, IFTE. Here I am with acronyms. And the IFTE pulls from probably like 4 different case studies to determine what national parking requirements should be. So there's some flaws with parking all around the country, what we're requiring. So I'm just pointing out the fact that this is a challenging property if we abide by the zoning ordinance as is, and if we're not flexible about parking, I don't think we'll ever see a business there. And we do have to treat every business equally, as we all know. So it might be better for this property to have a temporary event hall, because not everyone's going to be there throughout the whole day and whole week to use parking. Users are going to be there at different hours. So that's just one perspective. But I also want to bring up too, this future land use map is not yet adopted, Chair, but you did bring up a great point of what our vision of 9 Mile is. And the Planning Commission did vote to have the corridor considered 9 Mile corridor mixed use, which we have yet to define, but it is different from regional commercial. So it's not yet adopted though, so I don't know how that works in terms of the law, City Attorney, but it will go to City Council to be adopted and to amend the master plan and the vision of 9 Mile corridor.
Any other questions before we close this part of the public hearing?
But just to build on that though, wasn't the existing future land use map probably had similar designation already for the 9 Mile corridor? I don't know that for a fact, but you know, that's been a discussion we've had for a long time now about what to make that. So I would assume it was something similar, but not exactly the same in that area. Yes.
The future land use map states that it's regional commercial right now.
That's the current.
Yes.
I just have one question for clarification. There's a picture in our packet under trash collection and disposal. Can you show me where that is in comparison to the building on the picture that you pulled up? And do we know where that is positioned, if it will impact the 9 parking spaces that were supposed to be available?
If I may. I'm sorry, when the man from the trash company came out to show me where the dumpster would be placed, that before the dumpster was placed, it would actually be 11 parking spaces back there.
Okay.
So we took into the consideration the dumpster and the enclosure, 2 spaces. So that's why we said 9, not 11. But it was technically 11 spaces back there, but the dumpster and the enclosure takes 2.
That answers my question.
Thank you.
Right, and just to wrap that up, So right now, we know there's 24 municipal spots.
That's correct.
There are 3 behind your building right now? Is that accurate?
Okay, again.
Right behind your building?
Okay, so right behind that, excuse me right behind the building, there are 5.
Right behind your building. So
There's
those 5 you have.
5. 2 we won't consider as spaces because that's where the dumpster and the enclosure will be. So then that leaves 3 right behind the building. And then there are additional 6 with the 2 empty buildings that are right next to it.
But the 6, of course, are not. You don't have
I
any
don't-
right to those at this time.
It's public.
All right, so then that means we have 27 spots right now. We need 33, if I remember correctly. So we are a little short. Yeah.
And again, if we're considering the 24 being public, those other 6 behind should be public as well.
The 6 behind private buildings.
That's,
I
and,
don't think those are public.
oh, they're not public?
I don't think they are public.
Okay, and again, I'm talking to the building owner. I'm trying to figure this out. This is new for me. This is a new business venture for me, but I'm excited. I'm totally excited for it.
Chair, I'm not sure how you want to handle this since we don't have the parking agreements. I do have a suggestion. If parking is a limiting factor, you could always reduce your square footage by a rather small amount, and your number of patrons by a rather small amount to get to the 27.
I promise you, that was my next suggestion. I am willing to do that.
Any more questions from the commission?
A clarification on what you just suggested, Mr. Broll? Isn't that by the square footage of the building that determines parking, not?
Should be usable. Well, I'll let
Parking's determined based off the usable floor area, which we can also consider social floor area, and that's the place that people put their feet on, and does not include storage, kitchen, restroom, coat room.
Right, so if Ms. Easley were to shorten the allowable space for patrons, that would give her a different parking spot number?
Yes, of course.
Okay, all right, sorry, just clarifying.
Yeah.
And I am 100% in it. I'm fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. Most of my events will not be capacity events anyway. I've done this now for about 5 years, and I don't do big events. I'm more small, intimate, baby showers, repasses, things in that nature, business meetings. So.
Any other questions from the commission before we open up for public comment? Thank you, Ms. Easley. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to be heard? Mr. Lubeck, you can sit down, Ms. Easley.
Oh, thank you.
Good evening, Jeff Lubeck. I've looked at this, and I'm really kind of disappointed by how vague East Point's shared parking agreement is. There's a difference between shared parking when you have 2 spaces, but you need 50, or when you need 35 spaces and you have 30. Also, it doesn't address how we should treat public parking. Since public parking is intended for the area, businesses in that area, there ought to be some type of consideration on how much one particular business can depend on using public parking for their needs. When I heard the phrase across the street, across the street, across the street, I kept hearing across 9 Mile. And after the harrowing experience I had trying to get here down 9 Mile, that just sent chills down my spine. The thought of people, and possibly with children, trying to get across 5 lanes of traffic, as Mr. Broll said, that should be a no-go right there. Right now, I hear the applicant say there's 2 empty buildings and that parking isn't being used. what happens when those buildings become occupied and are used? And now their parking requirements or availability has been compromised. I guess in short, I would say I think this planning commission needs to look at the shared parking agreement in a little more detail and a little more depth so that they may actually get something that can be applied consistently rather than just saying, oh, well, just get shared parking agreements and you can do whatever you want without consideration for other factors. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to be heard? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll move on to new business. Item A. If you don't mind, I would like to take this one, since this was at my behest. I think that we have this bad habit in our city of forgetting those that have done the work. And former Chairman Palazzolo brought something to this commission that will be gravely lost. We all bring unique and different perspectives to this commission. Some of us are fallible. We make mistakes. But we all bring something to this commission. So I am asking for some discussion here amongst my fellow commissioners as to what can we do to appropriately recognize all the work that former Chairman Palazzolo has put in. And I would love some input from the city, and I don't know if Kim is here, but I think at bare minimum, something better than a 5-cent plaque or attaboy would be nice, but I do believe that we need to recognize the services that people are putting in, especially all the time and all the effort that we do. So, any thoughts from anybody? I'd love some input.
Kind of like with his departure, you're saying something
Mhm.
to acknowledge him for his departure?
Absolutely.
His departure and what he contributed.
I don't know the exact amount of time that Chairman Palazzolo was on, but he's been on ever since I've been on. And, I mean, I don't know of anybody, I mean, you're fortunate because this is kind of your industry, and you approach it from that perspective. He lives this stuff every day of his life, and it's what he's living right now, which is forcing him out of our jurisdiction because of all of his work needs. So I just feel like something needs to be done. And I would say that should apply to anybody that is volunteering their time on any commission in this city, and they have put the work in, deserves more than going off into that good night without any sort of recognition. I mean, how many commissions do we have within the city that people have put on 5, 10 years, then suddenly they've been put out because people think they've been on too long, and they just disappear? How many times have we ever thanked anybody? So this is why I have brought this forward. And that's why I'm asking for a little bit of input. I think that
Can we come back to that? I mean, I think it should give some more consideration. It's something I hadn't thought of, but I think we should give some more consideration.
okay.
Do we know if city council does anything for outgoing commissioners?
Ms. Holman?
We can investigate.
So then,
I'll be willing to ask. I don't know right offhand.
certainly not asking for a parade down Main Street or anything like that. Lord knows we'd probably never get the variances or whatever. Nobody to donate the money for the police. So, would somebody make a motion to table this conversation maybe to another meeting till we can get a little bit more insight from the city?
I follow
Well-
a motion that we table the discussion of how we compensate.
Okay. Do I have a second?
No support.
We have motion and support.
What exactly are you asking us?
I think we need recognition for Commissioner Lubeck, oh my God, for Commissioner Palazzolo. And maybe it's a question that needs to be asked of city council in general in reference to all commissions. What are you doing to thank somebody for their service?
So that was going to be my question before motions were made here.
We'll table the discussion on further
I
recognition
still
of.
had questions,
Okay, I'm sorry.
clarification.
Go ahead.
For Commissioner, former Chair Luback, we had a recognition. That was at a city council meeting, correct? Yeah, quasi. Fair enough.
If said individual had accepted their award or gone to a meeting,
Is that a recommendation?
If I may, Mr. Chair. Yes, I was approached by the city. They asked me to attend a council meeting to receive the recognition. However, I had a job change that has made Tuesday evenings quite a bit more hectic in my life. If there seems like there's one night a week that I'm going to be working late, it's Tuesday, followed closely by Friday for some odd reason. So yes, the recognition is waiting to be bestowed upon me, but I haven't been able to figure out how I'm going to guarantee I can be at a meeting on a Tuesday yet. So that is it.
So were you looking for city council to come up with what type of recognition, award, or presentation? Like, are you wanting us to do this, or are you wanting to ask city council?
if city council won't do it, I say we do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, if we
We
could
got
take some
something.
time to decide what we want to do, and, you know, it's not, I know I want to say right today, so I mean, give it some thought to it now.
Maybe we give up.
Something that we do, you serve with us, I don't know whether council has to do it, but you serve with us, so we could see what that would be.
The one thing that would involve council too is the fact that a council appointed him. You know, people on council
You can invite.
put his
them.
name up, yeah.
You know, you can
So-
invite them to be here that night, but I think it should be done.
All right. So we have motion and support to table the conversation until the next meeting. Secretary, please call the roll.
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Mr. Broll,
Yes.
Ms. Munez,
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Vice Chair DeHaan?
Yes. The second topic under new business, a discussion of new planning commission chair. Do we need to elect a chair tonight? What do we need to do, Mr. Albright?
It could be this evening, it is on the agenda for consideration, or it could be at a subsequent planning commission meeting.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts?
I think you're doing a great job.
You sure about that?
Well, you only have to fill out a few months. I vote you can do it.
I think a vice chair should step in when the president, when he moves, it kind of falls in your lap
All right, so
to the end of the term.
Chair,
yes.
if I may. In the past, how we've addressed new nominations for chair is, well, first having nominations for chair, and then having a second for that nomination, and then we vote.
Does anybody wish to make a nomination?
I have a nomination.
John?
John, I don't know if he's your last name,
DeHunt.
DeHunt. Vice chair should continue in the role of Chairman Palalosi.
Is there a second?
Support.
Thanks. Secretary, please call the roll.
Support.
Just wait till secretary comes up in January.
I learned not to say no a long time ago. Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Mr. Broll,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Ms. Munez. Do you get to vote on yourself?
Abstain.
Mr. Chairman, did the commission also want to vote on vice chair? This
Here we
evening?
go. I would like to nominate Mike Broll as vice chair.
Support.
It's not secretary.
Do we have to do a motion for them to accept?
Yes.
They never give me a choice.
Do you wish to
Accept-
accept the nomination? Sure. All right, Secretary, please call the roll.
Well, Chair, so, I'm sorry, if I may.
Mhm.
Congratulations, by the way. So we listened to see if there are all nominations for vice chair, and then we can go to a second. So we listen to all nominations, and then the nominee has to accept, and then we hear a second, and then we vote.
Okay. So you've been nominated, Mr. Broll. Do we have second?
I support it.
Sheila supported. Any other support? We can call a vote?
Yeah, if there's no other desire to run.
Anyone else?
Well, do you need a motion to, lost my train of thought.
Do you want to nominate someone else?
So we,
Do we need a motion to close the nominations?
The vote.
no?
The vote.
I don't think it's necessary. I don't believe that there are any other nominations.
All right. So
Mr.
we can vote now?
There's
Secretary.
there's a motion and a second, yes.
We have motion and second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman DeHunt,
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Mr. Lalonde,
Yes?
Ms. Munoz? Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. Broll? Abstain and accept?
You know, John's not going to be at the next 3 meetings. You know that.
Going on vacation. There you go. All right, so that's done. Congratulations, Mr. Broll. Likewise. Thank you. Let's moving on to the next item, Ms. Brashevsky.
The next item is to decide on the 183019 mile event space, site plan and special land use review.
So, given some of the things that you said about the parking being kind of outmoded a little bit, and the fact that we don't have signed parking agreements, I'm inclined to wonder if we just need to table this. Any thoughts from the commission?
I have a couple thoughts. And I'm a newbie at this, so take it with that much weight. But a couple of my thoughts were, one, and maybe the commission can provide some clarity on historically how you guys have handled this, but how far out are we talking about tabling it? Are we talking about tabling it to the next meeting? Because at the same time, we have an applicant who is, it sounds like, already investing in the property and has already signed a lease. And this is a building that, while we table it, will continue to remain vacant. And so as much as we may not want to cause any congestion in parking, we also don't want a vacant building that's sitting and making a portion of our city not look great. The other thought that I had was that we also don't want to discourage small business owners from coming into the community, especially when they're not responsible for the parking. It would be one thing if that parking were privately owned. The fact that it happens to be owned by the municipality seems unfair to hold that against the property owner, especially when it's not your typical parking where it could have just been 5 spaces that went along the side of the property, but here you have the ability to have 12 on either side of the street. And so that's really actually more of an advantage to property owners or to business owners that would otherwise not be there, because you don't have a lot of that happening around the city. The other thing is that the applicant did express numerous attempts, not only by her but also by the property owner, to go and try to obtain an agreement, a shared parking agreement, at least with the vet owner, and she even has looked into the properties adjacent to that one, and is also willing to possibly inhabit those other spaces should they become available that are directly next to her. So I think, not that we can make a decision on future plans that aren't in motion, but at least for those that are in motion, I would encourage us to see if there's a way to expedite our response in whatever direction, so that she can know what direction she's going.
Well, typically, we do give a meeting or 2 meetings, depending on how much time the applicant needs. That is our requirement for parking. We can't move forward on something if something isn't nailed down. That is part of the process of opening a business.
I understand that, but I also don't want us to just lag behind because we have the leisure of our space to do that. I want us to make sure that we're doing due diligence to give as quick of a timely response as possible, and especially when it is to the benefit of the city as a whole to have a space being used as opposed to sitting vacant for an extended period of time.
So I don't want to say pushback, but my comment would be, we need to be fair and consistent with everybody. And I believe the last event hall that came before us, we had to table because she didn't have her agreements in line. And if I'm not mistaken, there was also the one on Gratiot. Yes, there was the one on Gratiot that's going into the Chinese restaurant that we ended up tabling until she had her ducks in a row. So there is a history of this. And I think in the interest of being fair and consistent, we need to allow Ms. Easley and these business owners one more shot. And then I guess my question would be to Mr. Albright is, if the business owners are non-responsive to her desire to get shared parking agreements, is there a next step?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think the next step would be the applicant meeting with city administration about possibly reducing the actual usable floor plan, so the parking requirements could then be adjusted accordingly.
Okay.
Which the applicant was in agreement of.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we do have 27 that she knows she has access to.
May I ask a question? I really like the pro-business aspect of where you're going with it, but are you saying that pushing the meeting out to the next meeting for the applicant to try and tie up those, are you asking for something more than that, or?
I'm just trying to understand what the usual process is,
just
and
wondering.
is there a way to expedite so that even going forward, if we've historically put it off 2-3 meetings, can we shorten that length of time? Or if we always just, expedite it as quickly as possible, then great, hooray. That's what I don't have the benefit of knowing, and I just want to ensure that we don't discourage any business owner or investor who has a good investment that is to the benefit of the city. I want to make sure we don't discourage them from coming and wanting to invest here because, they're just going to keep rolling me off. That's all.
I don't
So it
know.
wasn't
Don't
accusatory,
discourage.
it was more of a quest for an answer of what is the typical practice and is there a way for us to do it better?
Yeah, fair points.
I don't ever remember us going longer than 1 month unless somebody just
No,
dropped
we
the ball
normally ask
and
the applicant
didn't get their papers.
what a good time frame for them is.
Yeah, Mr. Albright?
I mean, we try to work with them as much as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would recommend that if the matter is going to be tabled, that it be tabled to just the next meeting, in fairness to the applicant. But the commission may also want to ask the applicant what she prefers. If she believes that she can get these shared parking agreements signed within the next couple of weeks, or she may want to just forego that and reduce the size of the usable space and just proceed that way. I do believe during the public hearing portion that she did indicate that she'd be willing to do that. So maybe ask the applicant what she would prefer under the circumstances. based on her difficulty in getting shared parking agreements from some of the surrounding properties, it may be more in her best interest just to forego that completely and just work on adjusting the usable space of her land property.
Ms. Easley, would you?
And that could be done this evening, Mr. Chair, because it's reducing the amount, not expanding.
So then what is the actual number we need to get to? It's 27. So what would that shrink, if you don't mind, Fire Marshal, what would that need to happen on the inside of the building? What is her space shrinking down to?
So what is the
2317.
per carload, the three, one space, one car per three occupants, is that accurate?
Chair. So I oversee the zoning ordinance, so you would direct your question towards me, not the fire marshal. And the ordinance says that one parking space is required every 75 square feet of usable floor area. So every 75 square feet, plus one for each employee during their longest shift. So I'll figure out the math right now, but we can also, if you're interested in this momentum, make a motion to make sure that the 27 parking spaces comply to zoning ordinance standards for usable floor area.
Okay. Does anybody wish to make the motion? Did you wish to make the motion?
Make a motion on that. Make a motion to allow for the adjustment of the space to accommodate the current parking
Of 27 spaces?
of 27 spaces.
Mr. Albright, Mr. Albright, do you need any more in the motion, or is that going to be sufficient for you?
Are we just deciding that portion of it, or are we actually approving the site plan subject to that?
Okay.
So it would also be a motion to approve, for site plan approval, subject to the adjusted parking requirements.
Okay, I'll restate the motion.
Please.
I file a motion that we approve the site plan, subject to the reduction of the space to accommodate the current 27 parking spaces.
Okay. Do we have second?
I'll support.
We have motion and support. Secretary, please call the roll.
Ms. Naylor?
Yes?
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
I just want to make sure I understand what the motion is. I'm sorry, I was in mid-thought. So to reduce the allowable square footage for the patrons to accommodate 27 parking spots, is that
Correct.
accurate? Okay, which I think is 1,875. Yes.
Ms. Munoz?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman DeHunt?
Yes. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
That just
Mr.
takes
Chair,
it down to 20,000.
You
Mr.
still need
Chairman?
special land
23.
use.
We also have the special land use review that needs to also be considered and ultimately voted on by the planning commission this evening.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask a question of clarification? If in the future, the applicant or any applicant that was approved for a site plan was later able to get agreements for parking, could they come back and present those and request to be able to increase the usable space?
I was reading
Okay,
the
no, I'm
proposed
sorry.
motion.
No, there wasn't a motion. My question, it was a question of clarification. If, in this case, the applicant was able to later get the shared parking agreements with the neighbors, would she then be able to come back and request a modification of the usable space in accordance with those agreements on the shared parking?
One of the members on the planning commission could make a motion for reconsideration.
Question for the city, no, for Mr. Albright. It seems to me that we just made a motion on a site plan prior to making a motion on a special land use. Seems out of order. Is that an issue?
No, because the vote is going to happen now. If one would cancel the other out. So if the request for special land use approval does not carry, then it would make the site plan a moot point.
Thank you.
The planning commission, sometimes these things happen. Would the preferred way to do the special land use approval motion first? Yes, but if it doesn't, it's not favorable.
Okay. And then, forgive me, you said we need to make a motion for the site plan approval, correct?
Special land use.
Special
We
land
just
use,
did the
yes.
site plan.
Yes.
Yes, and there is a recommended motion in the planning commission's packet.
Does anybody wish to make that motion?
I file a motion for the acceptance for the special land use for the facility at, I'm looking for the address, so the 18301 Nimo.
It's on page 2.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I can read it into the record, and then
Okay,
Please.
if that would help clarify.
yes, thank you.
You're welcome. It would be a motion to recommend approval of the proposed special land use for an event hall at 18301 9 Mile Road, parcel ID number 02-14-29-476-033 to City Council based on the findings of fact listed in the review.
File a motion to accommodate what the attorney has just read.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have motion and support. Secretary, please call the roll.
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Mr. Broll,
Yes.
Ms. Munoz,
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman DeHunt,
Yes. Moving on to
I've got a pertinent question. For city administration, we're talking about shared parking, and I just want to understand, we had talked a couple meetings ago about the fact that, and it's not it's relevant to the conversation, but that if somebody had a shared parking agreement, that it would be part of the process during the annual business license renewal that anybody with a shared parking agreement, that it would be reviewed as part of that to make sure that, hey, they still do have a shared parking agreement that's valid at this time. Has that been added into the process of reviewing the business license renewal?
We're just finalizing that process, but I do have that knowledge.
It's in process, okay. Can you just do me a favor? Can you share that with us when it's formalized? That'd be awesome, thank you.
Moving on to unfinished business, item A. Ms. Prashasevsky.
Yes, and if I may, Deandra, congratulations. We're gonna, so the vote still has to go to city council, and I would meet with Deanna in the hall, but I'm running this meeting too, so. Okay, thanks, Kim. Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is exciting. We're continuing our zoning ordinance update. Congratulations, City of East Point. We're discussing our mixed-use commercial districts today. And the steering committee met 2 weeks ago, last week, August 23rd, to discuss the vision for our future commercial districts, or the future vision of our commercial districts. So today we wanted to start with understanding some of the commissioners' feedback. I know you've been assigned specific corridors, and we can spend as much time as you'd like on this, but I thought it would be a good idea to have a conversation on what we want to keep and fix and aspire in our commercial districts. So we would just want to jot down and shout out ideas of what we want to keep fixed and aspire. I'm going to ask if there's any representatives from the 8 Mile or Gratiot non-downtown area to provide some feedback on what they want to see. And if you're not a representative, you can still suggest some feedback.
Well, my homework was the most undevelopable section of 9 Mile that I think could be, and that would be Kelly Road to the freeway. And I looked at this, and I drove past it a number of times, and I just I don't see how we could do much there. The ironic part is, the only thing that I could see going there successfully would be a marijuana location that I have railed against forever. But it seems to be the only location the only thing I could visualize. Now, I theorize that, in order to make it something better, you would have to essentially bulldoze half the buildings and pull them forward, but there's really, that area it doesn't seem like there's much developable concept to it. The houses are so close, and I don't see, when I look at the south part of 9 Mile, there's so little space between the businesses, and I was challenged by that. I kept looking at it, and you have legacy businesses such as the car wash over there where people are driving through. And then you have these odd little businesses that are pushed back just enough, but then there's space behind. In my mind, I see taking them all out and just putting something straight down and making it more shoppable, for lack of a better phrase. It just seems, it's such an odd little area. Although I did also hypothesize that the area where the grocery store and Office Depot and all that would be a beautiful little mixed-use area if you could do something besides retail, like a little park, a little green space, some housing, something along those lines. But I just don't see much outside of all those buildings coming down. I just don't see much to be done with that. Unless I'm mistaken, unless your vision is different for that area.
Thanks, Chair. No, this is a conversation. In any city, we accommodate all types of uses. So it's fair that you said in some certain areas of the city, we might need to have a little bit of non-family oriented uses. And that might be the location for it. Or we might go to the direction of creating or implementing design overlay. So if anyone comes in that area, they would have to abide by the new design requirements and perhaps put in, like you mentioned, a plan unit development.
But, it kind of goes hand in hand with the conversation we had the other day. Kelly Road has so much developable, there's so much, it's like a blank slate. You could do so much with it if you had the right people wanting to develop it. And you have a great access point off of 9 Mile. And you have a great access point off the freeway if you wanted to make an avenue of fashion, if you wanted to create a legitimate entertainment district. I'm not talking about, having a couple of nights a week and you closing off the street and doing whatever like they do in St. Clair Shores, actually having little brew pubs down 9 Mile or destinations, hard brick and mortar destinations that give people a reason to go there. It's just the perfect area. And I don't know, you got to find a developer with some big pockets and some great vision.
Chair, if I may. Okay. Were you able to receive the case studies that I sent you in an email?
I did. Oak Park is a great case study.
Yeah, it is. What impressed you about that case study?
That there was an old community, as we are, has been able, and they have the same type of grid system of streets that we do.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was a great opportunity, and that's why I defer back to, You know, it would be great to have a brewery here, or a brew pub, or whatever. There's just so much opportunity. You look at the old, the building that's up for sale right now that used to be the Powerboat Association. Great location to put a restaurant in. And I would think that you could do something like that down Kelly Road with all that empty land. I mean, there is a lot of potential. We just have to find, not we, the city, has to find people that are willing to toe the line and to invest and wait it out and build it. You know, I've never been a fan of the whole Field of Dreams thing. If you build it, they will come. Because it just seems to me it's a lot of money being put out on the if come. That's why you have to find reasons for people to stop. Not just waiting for the dream to happen, but for them to actually come here and do something. And have people wanting to come and do something. Years ago, I traveled to Benton Harbor, and I'm sorry if I digress, but they had spent tens of millions of dollars putting all of this beautiful concrete work in, berms and planters and all that. It was absolutely gorgeous. But there was Beirut on either side after the war, and it looked horrible. They built it, nobody came. I don't want to see something like that. So if you get some people that are willing to go in and invest, like the gentleman at Big Daddy's, he's rehabbing another building. Give people a reason to start spending money there. Then people want to be there, and developers want to be there, and then things happen.
Yeah, Chair, if I may represent this case study. So I actually had the opportunity to speak with Kim Marone, who's the Economic Development Director at the Michigan Economic Development Association conference last week. It was in downtown Detroit. So I talked with her about this project because I also think it's a really cool project. It was a former industrial corridor. Some of these buildings were vacant, so underutilized vacant industrial buildings that were zoned, they're zoned industrial. So Kim actually had this vision to create a mixed-use commercial corridor at this location. And in order to spur or catalyze this mixed-use corridor, she went out with one of her, I think actually the city manager, and attended a brewery conference in Western Michigan and marketed the city to this brewery. I said that, talked about how they have lower retail or lower building costs. I'm not sure what that relates to today after the pandemic, but just represented the different dynamics of the city to make it attractable for these breweries to open up, because they're looking for cheaper square footage than we can find in traditional downtown areas. And then what they did was they rezoned, which we're engaging in right now, and that attracted our anchor, as you mentioned, an anchor brew pub or brewery, and the other development that's along there, like the coffee shop and the 2 restaurants, that came with the anchor brewery. And Kim did not provide any economic development tax incentives. She just rezoned. So rezoning is a key tool for economic development. And we're working on marketing East Point with buffing up our economic development team right now.
Anybody else have homework that they just turn into this process?
I mean, this is a conversation.
I'd like to look at the, looking at that stretch you have, which it is somewhat limited because you get between Kelly and 94 so quickly, but there's large space and land between the Secretary of State, which squeezed in next to the market. I don't know if there's parking restrictions, but there's a good sizable space between the Secretary of State and that second glance or building.
There was, if I remember correctly, when we approved for the Secretary of State, there was already a fight over having enough parking spaces for that.
Well, that was a bad situation because that use of the Secretary of State is just a lot of cars. But they are kind of minimizing with the appointments and they've streamlined operations. However, I don't know how many parking spaces we would lose, but there is some additional space. I very seldom see anyone parked alongside a second glance.
There was,
There on Saturdays, and I shop at that Aldi's. But I'm just thinking that was a space. And then we have that old Bank of America on the corner of 9 Mile and Beaconsfield. between Beaconsfield and Raven, the bank is vacant. That could potentially be Surface Drive kind of close, but that could be a destination because it's come right off the freeway. You're right at this spot to go to East Point to attend whatever that becomes.
The other aspect is very difficult too, is because you cannot turn left onto those streets from 9 Mile, which creates a bit of an issue. So it's an awkward location. That's kind of why I hated to even think about it as a marijuana facility, but I kind of thought it would be perfect because you get in, do your thing, get back on the freeway, and go. But it's just so awkward over there. Like a nice clear field, you could do something.
So are you speaking like if you're coming from the shopping plaza off
If
the
you're
Depot
coming,
side?
if you were to come off the freeway or straight up 9 Mile into the city, you can't turn left into, you can turn left into businesses, but you can't turn left onto those streets.
That's only from, I believe, 3 to 6, and I can't remember. I think there's morning hours too. I'm not positive. I know 3 to 6 for sure. And unfortunately, people do it on a daily basis.
That's why I didn't know it was allowed, to be honest.
Oh, there's signs on every corner.
I saw the sign that said you can't turn left, like if you're coming out of Office Depot.
Yeah.
Can't turn left onto 9 Mile. But I didn't realize.
Even on that particular location, there's no left turn lane, even if you could. Right? It's striped, there's not a spot. We talked about this before, and so like if there were supply trucks that were, if it was a restaurant and the supply truck was gonna come off the freeway, especially a 53-footer,
Oh, yeah, we
it'd
do.
be impossible to
Yeah, we do
figure out
narrow
how
it.
the logistics behind that. We've had discussions about that one way in the past, drive-through possibilities and things. It's just, it is to Chairman DeHaan's point, it's an awkward.
Yeah, I see it now that
Spot for
the
that.
lane reduces, the left lane reduces at Beaconsfield for the right-hand turning lane, okay.
Yeah, do we have any other comments on anything we want to keep fix or spire in other locations?
I mean, we talked about the Kelly Street, and the steering committee. It's, somebody stole my crown, I'm still stuck on the steering column, trying to get it fixed. Sorry about that. The steering committee. And Kelly does offer a lot of opportunities because there's some buildings that are set back far enough that we talked about, pulling the directional lanes, making one way so they could pull forward and put like little patios and things in front of their building to make it more of a destination view, a little more family friendly. That was a recommendation on Kelly. Kelly just has such a wide range of everything from 8 to 10 Mile. You go from residential on one side, and then it's some residential sprinkled in between businesses. But I think facing north on Kelly, the left side of the street, the western side of the street, offers greater opportunity because they do have that wide parking. And then I think once you get past Topher, it's almost like residential all the way up to 10. But the western side of the street does offer opportunity where we talked about where Big Daddy is expanding. He's doing a strip mall right now. It's like 6 or 7 units. And we were saying maybe an early engagement of conversation of the type of tenant he reduced. And then that could be one of those social distancing areas. But it would be based on if he's willing to partner with the city kind of to, solicit certain type of business. And we work with him to solicit certain types of businesses in those spaces. But other than that, there was not much open on Kelly. You would have to, either if we had a developer that was willing to come in and build on top, but we have a 2-story limit. We did say we can go 4 or 5. But those would be some areas where we could probably see some increased elevations. And then it's just what would the cost be to the existing businesses while that's happening. But the western side of Kelly offers a lot of opportunity. I mean, I've seen them do it in Washington, D.C., where they come in and they just build on top and still have access to those businesses. With any construction is a distraction to the business. But maybe get some partnership from those business owners, building owners, if the business is actually leasing the space, maybe.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Naylor. Kelly Road has brought a lot of joy to our conversations when we think about the future of East Point. And something that I do want to point out before we move into the next question I have for you guys, staff's been considering creating the parking lot in front of the Kelly Road businesses. Are you familiar that this parking lot in front of Kelly Road businesses is city right away?
Hmm.
Okay. Well, hello. Kelly Road businesses, the parking lot in front of Kelly Road businesses, or actually we did discuss that during our event hall conversation on Kelly Road.
I think I am remembering this.
We did.
Yeah, so this parking space right here is publicly owned, it's public right of way. However, our utilities are under here. So we've been talking with the engineer about different possibilities of how we can rethink creating more of a pedestrian pathway along Kelly. And we want to model what English Gardens did. We're at the corner of 9 and Kelly. As you can see, they angled their parking to get about like 20, maybe 15, 20 feet, additional 15, 20 feet for their building. So we're thinking we'll angle the parking. You can see the difference here. Do you see the line where there's still sufficient parking spaces, but there's this much room left in front of the building? So that's about 15, 20 feet. Parking length is 20 feet long. So we have the idea of redirecting parking to be one way, in and out, and then creating a patio, or the culture of allowing to have like a 15-foot patio and dedicated pedestrian walkway along Kelly, right in front of the building doors. So that's something that we talked about with the steering committee, and also a property owner who just bought this location right here and is renovating it right now to be a series of retail. I'm not sure what type of retail yet, but the owner of Big Daddy Games also owns this property. And he is very on board with having a dedicated pedestrian pathway. So that's some exciting news for Kelly.
If I may, I'm sorry. When we hashed out this master plan that was killing us for a couple years, we identified, there were two specific things that we identified as great opportunity, and that was 9 Mile and the other one was Kelly. And one of the conversations that we had all so long ago was about doing exercise, walk trails, whatever, down the medians, things like that. So we all talked about this 5-6 years ago. So it's nice to actually see people wanting to act on things that we talked about 5 or 6 years ago. Mr. Brawl?
Was the walkway, is there parking on both sides then? That seems to me that walkway would take the inner parking spot. Is that true? Or like English Garden has it on both sides, right? But
Yeah,
you're
that's
saying
correct.
there'd be a walkway adjacent to the building, right?
Yes, it will run parallel to the building.
Would you still be able to park on both sides then? Or would you?
Yes.
Would there be enough room?
Yes, you don't see the walkway here along English Gardens. I mean, maybe it's because they have an overhang, but I think it's because they built the building to be to that lot line, and they did not cherish the option to have that pedestrian
Yeah, so
15-foot
flowers, you can't see it.
path. Okay, thank you for your feedback on this. If you have any other feedback on what we should fix, keep, aspire in general for our commercial districts, let me know. But I do have another question for you.
Mara,
Burning question. Yeah.
before you move on, I did have some feedback about the Gratiot half-mile north and half-mile south of
Great.
9 Mile Road. It was outside, yeah, half-mile north and a half-mile south of 9 Mile Road. And especially the half-mile north, right there at between Gratiot and Topher. I drive past there quite a bit. And I do have the right section, right? You kind of have a puzzle
Um,
on your face.
What I think, so, okay, we're looking at the downtown corridor.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner. And are we saying, I think Topher South of,
Hold on, let me make sure that I read this right. Yeah, so on my, on the form that you gave me, it says a half mile north and half mile south of 9 Mile. The areas that are outlined on here are, Gratiot between Topher and 8 and Gratiot between Stevens and 9. So what I actually looked at were those two sections.
yeah, perfect. That's
that right?
the downtown.
Okay. So, with respect to, the Keep, Fix, Aspire, for that section between Stevens and, 10 Mile, I really liked, particularly right there at Stevens, is the storage facility is really great, foliage and greenery. And when you drive past there, it's just kind of refreshing, even though I'm not a big fan of storage facilities. but just the aesthetic of it's, you know, it's cleaned up, it's uniform, regardless of the fact that it's just a storage facility, it looks nice on the outside, as opposed to when you're coming down Gratiot out of Detroit, entering into what is to be the gateway to Macomb County. It's stark contrast and quite disappointing and quite frustrating. So there was a lot of fix in that column, and a lot of aspire in that column. I really do like the fact, in terms of keep for that area closer to 8 Mile, I like the fact that, you know, there's just a line of trees that goes straight down Gratiot. And I like that greenery right in the center aisle that carries you all the way through East Point. But when you are looking on either side, coming into the city, it doesn't look like you're coming into a family town. It doesn't look like you're coming into what should be the gateway to Macomb County. And that particular section just needs a lot. There's a lack of uniformity. There's a lack of markers for the public parking spaces. There's a lack of green space, with the exception of the center aisle. And it's just like a mix mash of whoever wanted to have something. And so anyway, I don't know if that's the feedback you were looking for, but.
Which location are you describing just now?
Pardon?
Which area were you just describing?
The section from 8 Mile to Topher
8 to Topher. Okay, thank
on Gratiot. Yeah. And as you get closer to Topher, it gets a little bit better, of course. The bank renovated, that made that section look a lot better, but at any rate, that was the feedback that I had on those sections.
Okay, thank you. That's just for clarification. That's the Gratiot non-downtown commercial corridor.
Non-downtown.
Yes. Okay, great.
I have one comment on
Yeah.
9 Mile. I think the aspire should be to have more public parking. If we're going to if we want to create that as a destination to walk and shop and window shop and that type of thing, we need to have, the goal isn't to have somebody drive in, go to a business, and leave. The goal is to have them come in and want to hit 3 different places, have a place to park, and walk a quarter mile and window shop and fill our city. So I think public parking would be something to aspire for on 9 Mile Road.
There was a certain irony in the fact that everything that we had 30, 40, 50 years ago on Gratiot with buildings at the front. We demoed parking in the front. Now, all of a sudden, the vision is to go back to what we threw away. I mean, there was a time that you could go to the dime store, you go to the Park Lane Lounge to get a cocktail, and if you were a randy individual, you can go to the Capri Theater for a movie that you never told your wife about. And you had the butcher shop across the street. You had the shoe store. You had everything. And now we're looking to go back in history, which is not always a bad thing. Maybe we didn't have it wrong 50 years ago as far as the building development. Maybe we should just stuck it out. So, yeah. Well, East Point has an interesting history. We used to have a couple adult theaters that some of the church ladies ran out of town, and there was one in the downtown district. This was a bustling city.
As an idea, if you had, similar to what's behind the Enterprise Rent-A-Car where there's vacant spots, if you had an area where people could park and it was a public parking spot every so many square blocks along 9 Mile Road, you know, I mean, the Enterprise might be privately owned, but I mean, I'm talking about a private parking lot. Right behind the business line. Like, there's residential houses there now, but I mean, if there were houses that were dilapidated and the city took them over, it'd be a great spot to start expanding into parking. The first row or first set of houses right behind the businesses. I can't take credit for that. Somebody else said it, but it's worth saying.
The sad thing, too, is the way the Catholic churches have disintegrated. I mean, we lost St. Barnabas. I mean, how long is it before we potentially lose St. Basil? And there you have a massive piece of property. Because if church rolls continue to dwindle, you know, therein is another opportunity along 9 Mile. I mean, I'm not hoping that we see St. Basil's close, but, you know, 5 years ago, nobody expected to see St. Barnabas go away. So, you know, if you're going to do some forward thinking, that's something we have to keep in mind, because there's a school there that nobody's doing anything with that I'm aware of, unless they're renting it out to somebody. But there's a massive piece of property right in the heart of the city. And if that thing ever became available, I mean.
I thought that was a good idea St. Clair Shores did with Pear School. They turned it into office space, and there's like a lot of nonprofits that are in there.
Secretary, what case study did you just reference?
Oh, it wasn't a case study. There's Pear School in St. Clair Shores, P-A-R-E. They had closed, and they turned it into office space, the school, and there are several nonprofits that operate out of it.
Well, it's a case study now.
I thought it was a good idea. I mean, what a great use of the space.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
I mean, this is a forward-thinking project, so we need to be forward-thinking in case St. Basil's ever collapses, sadly.
So I've been in conversations with city administration and the steering committee, and we are rethinking churches and schools previously in the steering committee conversations, we've been rethinking churches and schools and allowing for planned unit developments at these locations. This is exactly the line of thinking that you're representing today. And then I've had conversations with city staff that we will present to the steering committee, and I want to discuss with you today, we'll present to you today, the idea of allowing for more density, or maybe even requiring for more density at former or current banks and other larger vacant properties along 9 Mile. Because like you're right, the vision that you've had for years is to create 9 Mile to be your main street. And it's a long stretch from Gratiot to Kelly. So if we're going to be creating this main street to provide more interest for people to walk through, then we need to have more dynamic street fronts. And an excellent tool to do that is with density. So requiring at strategic locations some density. So if you feel comfortable, Chair, I have two burning questions.
Okay.
Okay. So in your packet that you received from the steering committee, we're discussing the iconic four corners of East Point. So that's 9 Mile and Gratiot. And we took a poll. Are you familiar with this, this sheet within your zoning ordinance update packet?
Is that memo 5?
Sorry, say that again?
What is that we're looking at?
Exercise 3, commercial and mixed-use corridors, height requirements for the four corners of East Point. It's towards the end of the packet, the steering committee packet.
Am I missing something? I don't have it. Okay. I don't have it. Was it supposed to be in the packet for the week?
It's in the steering committee packet that I forwarded along.
Oh, I didn't print from.
Let me see if I could pull up the steering committee packet. I'd have to check my email.
Yeah, came out.
You emailed it?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't have power to print, so
Okay.
probably.
That's fine. We can just make note to print a copy for
Thank
you
you.
of the steering committee packets.
Gonna start you.
But what we're looking at, I think, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. I'm new here, but you're not. So the Michigan Economic Development Corporation teamed up with the city of East Point and Smith Group to produce a potential rendering for the former Big Boy site. Are you familiar with this project?
Was this the charrette thing that was proposed many years ago from Tulane?
I'm hearing no.
I remember when Mayor Pixley was in office, Tulane had come in and they had talked about a number of things, and I believe that was one of the things about pulling the development forward to the street. And in my conversations with her, I remember the hopeful aspiration of taking the Ken South Park and going all the way to 9 Mile, taking out the gas station and putting a nice project there. I believe that was one of the things, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was a conversation about doing some sort of a transportation node or hub or something near 8 Mile, and there might have been something else, but
Walkable thing on Kelly in the median with like a walking path and potential vendors and or artwork. Was part of that,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Okay. Well, while I'm pulling this up, I'm happy you brought up 8 Mile and Gratiot, because that's also something else we discussed in the steering committee meeting. And also Commissioner Munez, you brought up, and the master plan brought up, probably because you participate in all those charrettes, Chair. The master plan designates that area as the Gratiot Gateway. So the steering commission, as Commissioner Naylor pointed out, wants to have a density overlay at 8 Mile and Gratiot to act as our Gratiot Gateway. And we were considering 10 stories of mixed-use commercial over there.
Did you just say 10?
Yes. Did I get that wrong, Commissioner?
No, we did, where the shopping center is, that sits behind another shopping center. We could put some green space and a high-rise with a unique shape to see East Point as a different city. And yes, 10 stories is much higher than anything in our city, but it would give us a real welcoming effect to kind of change that as we cross 8 Mile.
Oh, yes.
Great. So I pulled up the burning questions, okay? The city, as I mentioned, partnered with MEDC and Smith Group to rethink how we want to use this vacant space, the former Big Boy site, at our iconic four corners of East Point. And what I mean by that, like, this is East Point. 9 Mile and Gratiot is East Point. It's also designated as the downtown area, and our DDA is formed within these boundaries. So these are corners that we want to have, like, hold dear and have visions for, especially to show to the passersby that East Point has something here. This is our downtown, because right now it doesn't look like the downtown area, but we can always plan for that. So Smith Group put together, as authorized by Michigan Economic Development Corporation and with the assistance of the city, a rendering. We see a 4-story building with a first floor commercial restaurant and the 3 stories of residential. So it is a commercial mixed-use residential building. And we took a poll. So I want to take a poll here today to understand what you guys think. So how appropriate is the above building if constructed tomorrow at the intersection of Gratiot and 9 Mile? Can we go one by one and vote? Is it very inappropriate? Are we neutral? Is it very appropriate? What do you guys think?
Very appropriate.
Okay, Leo?
You know?
Appropriate.
Extremely appropriate.
Beyond appropriate.
Oh, that was mine.
Let's get creative. What do you think?
To the moon and back appropriate.
Show off.
Appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is, how appropriate are minimum height requirements at the intersection of Gratiot and 9 Mile? So this means, how appropriate is it to require a 4 or 5-story building at 9 Mile and Gratiot?
Very appropriate.
Did you say inappropriate?
Very appropriate. It's downtown.
Appropriate.
Appropriate.
Contingent upon acceptance by the police and fire. Appropriate.
Very appropriate.
Yeah, I would say appropriate. Isn't there a senior building just behind that that's at least that height, if not more? So, yeah.
Yes. I was just making sure I tallied everything up. Okay, great. So the steering commission also agrees with you. We had a vote of 5 to 3 to 2. So 5 was a majority who agreed that it is very appropriate on both questions. Well, it was unanimous on the first question that this development is very appropriate. The second question, with a minimum height requirement, was 5 to 3 to 2. So very appropriate for 5 people. 3 people thought it was inappropriate, and 2 people were more neutral and needed more information. So I brought up the whole conversation on, the reason why we're updating our zoning ordinance is to make the zoning ordinance more flexible and user-friendly, business-friendly, eliminating unnecessary restrictions and hurdles. The 1 minute of this whole timeline of all of our series of conversations that we're having for the zoning ordinance is making it business-friendly. 1 minute of this timeline, the 1 minute, we are asking for a little bit more requirements at these iconic intersections because we do want East Point to stand out here and make it a downtown corridor. So that's something that I want to leave with you today, that sentiment of how we can make just these key parcels have a little bit more of a vision there. And we also recognize how serious we need to be to pair, if we have a minimum height requirement, with the proper economic development policy incentives. And that's something that staff and I are actively pursuing, how we can establish an obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act district, how we can use the Macomb County's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority to establish a TIF, tax increment financing district, and how we can set up our own revolving loan fund. So these are all conversations that I'm having, and the purpose of establishing these incentives, this is important here, is so that we can see our community benefits. And what I'm describing as community benefits is additional density, additional height. So we want to help offset that cost of the developers, because the community benefit is to have additional height there, because we do want it to be a vocal downtown area. So with incentives, we can help support the vision that we see for the developers that will come. And side note, I know it's kind of late, but I just attended MEDA, Michigan Economic Development Association Conference, and developers are out there, especially for multifamily housing, which we see in here in this project. And because there's so much federal money, so they're just looking for locations and zoning ordinances and perhaps incentives that help them even more.
Question. Do you know what the feedback was? What, 3 people felt it was very inappropriate on question number 2? Do you have any feedback on that? What are we missing?
I think that I did a better job of explaining how important it is to pair economic development policy incentives or tax incentives today with you, because these tax incentives provide development support to create these projects that we want to see. I also think that there's been a negative perception of East Point, and there's been a perception that development hasn't happened here within 30 years. So I think we need to rethink what our community has, like the positive components of our community, and the new leadership that we're seeing here today. And we also need to reread our master plan, and I'm providing a little update of our demographic analysis and market analysis of East Point. Because after reading a demographic analysis and market analysis of East Point, I see that there's room for the industries that we are discussing today to host, like retail, grocery, like bars, brewery. All of these, like Esri market data, shows that there are gaps of these industries within East Point. And the way they show that is they show consumer data from East Point residents, and they show that consumers in East Point are going elsewhere. They're spending these dollars elsewhere in other cities because East Point does not have these industries. So that's something I'm just giving a primer so we can recalibrate our vision of East Point and understanding of what the facts are, because I think that there's some conversation based off of, or just a negative perception, and we can't work with negative perceptions. We can work with reality.
Margaret,
So did I miss anything yet, Commissioner?
Yeah,
And
may
also,
I
I'd
ask
like to
something?
invite Assistant City Manager too, because they were also participants.
He was asking why did the 3 were kind of hesitant to say this is appropriate. And a lot of that stemmed by the fact that we were saying we had minimum height requirements. So if it was not at least a 2-story, people were not interested. So they thought it was not necessary to make it 4 or 5 if it was going to be restrictive. So if something was less than that, then no one's coming. And we've had this sit here a couple years, 10 years or something, I don't know how many years. And they were saying then the height restrictions is preventing moving forward. Because somebody comes with only 2 stories, we're saying no. What was that height restriction that they opted to say, well, no, it's better to get somebody there than keep sitting there. That was the logic behind it.
Thank you.
This is just my observation, not necessarily to be argumentative. the Four Corners concept is good. But if I come in with $5 million and I want to build something in a different area, same type of project, I want to make sure that, I would hope, let me rephrase, I would hope that somebody who wants to put a project in the Four Corners would have the same consideration that we are applying a fair and consistent pattern to somebody who wants to put something at 8 and Kelly, or Stevens and Kelly, or whatever, wherever it is. When you say, all right, Four Corners, I'm gonna give you all this love, it seems kind of biased a little bit, as opposed to somebody who might wanna go outside of the Four Corners. Maybe they wanna go outside of the DDA. So my hope is that we would keep an open mind for developments along these lines past the Four Corners. Because I just think if you only focus on that one area, that's the only area you're ever gonna get development in. So,
I think we also said Stevens and Topher, some new building, and even there on 8 Mile, we brought that up. There was a burn down grocery store. So
Yep.
that's still on 8 Mile. That's when we brought up about the strip mall on 8 Mile. So we're not going to be exclusive, but we definitely want to entice as much as we can to the Four Corners to create that downtown hub, and hopefully some of that mixed use can be some of those bars. People will walk to 90 Gratiot and sit down with their family. We're hoping. We're dreaming, so dream big.
Mr. Chair, if I may, it is actually sort of the opposite of that. The idea with the Four Corners is that it would become more of a requirement term, so that any new development, right now in the PDA, any new development requires 2 stories. So the thought was this is then raising that it could happen in any place else in the city. It's just that at the Four Corners, it would actually be a requirement.
all right, so let me ask another question then. So we'll play devil's advocate here for a minute, and I apologize for dragging this out. You want 4 stories, let's say I come in and I want to put 3 stories up. Are you going to walk away from my millions of dollars worth of investments for only 3 stories?
So my answer would be our economic development incentives would fund the 4 stories. You would fund your ground floor or bring a significant amount of development. We'd have to write the policy, but we would support our vision and say, like, if you don't have that much money, we would gap finance that.
Just the idea of telling somebody how many stories they have to build just kind of reeks of overreach to me a little bit. But you're the specialist in this type of thing. I defer to you, but it just reeks of overreach, and I would hate to think that, potential developments might not go there because, they have to put up this big whatever. So, but again, I defer to you.
I hear you, and it's a sensitive conversation, which is why we want to involve everyone today. But the thing I can say is, we're allowed to plan for our future, and we're allowed to have a design of what we want to see at just these corners. Or we can have a vision everywhere else, but, we want to scale it down to the 4 corners. Anyway, if we don't have anything else to say, I have the progress memo in front of you. You can take it, but we've discussed everything within it today already. But if you need a review of what was discussed at August 23rd's meeting, here it is. And coming up for our next conversation is a continued conversation on mixed-use corridors with specific consideration to allowable building types. So that's like different heights or like different design requirements. And then materials used for these buildings, signage, and landscaping requirements. So it'll be a little bit more creative and fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Holman, thank you for providing the East Point charrette from 2015. It's a very fascinating book if you haven't seen it already. There was a lot that was talked about. I have to give Mayor Pixley credit for working with these folks back then. So the vision has always been there. It's just a matter of execution, so. All right, moving on to the second hearing of the public. Is there anybody that wishes to be heard? We have Mr. Lubeck who wishes to be heard.
Jeff Lubeck, and I just want to say, Ms. Brzezowski, you hit a nerve with me when you said 30 years, because that's how long I've been watching planning and lack of development in East Point. Up here, the second part of the meeting, man, you're talking the talk. You're talking real good, and then Mr. DeHaan walks right into where we don't walk the walk. That some kind of occupancy is better than vacancy. How do you ever get to where you're going if you keep selling yourself short? Four Corners, my first thought was after that charrette in 2015, they were referring to Stevens and Gratiot. For quite a long time, that property was tied up in litigation, and the city never gave it a second thought. Once the city came out triumphant in that litigation, they grabbed onto, like grim death, the first and only offer they have. They didn't even make an opportunity to attract development. Thank you, self-storage. Something else, you were talking about bars. That hit another nerve with me. Back between 2003, 2007, the mayor at the time and I were at one of the local watering holes, and in walked one of the restaurateurs that had a place in East Point and ended up leaving to go with a big national group, highly sought-after restaurant. And the mayor straight up asked him, "What do we have to do to get one of yours in East Point?" The restaurateur said, "It'll never happen." And the reason why, and he held up his bottle of beer and says, because people in East Point will not pay $5 for a bottle of beer. The mayor promptly corrected him and said, yes, they will, but they won't do it in East Point. So that was kind of an interesting thing right there. I don't know if they would have had a destination place, but he had been at a couple of the locations in the area, St. Clair Shores, and I believe it was Royal Oak, and he said he saw a lot of his old East Point customers in there spending $5 on a bottle of beer. Moving on to another subject, congratulations, Mr. Chairman DeHaan and Mr. Vice Chairman Broll. And I'm going to make the same comment I made at the last meeting. I think if you go 10 stories, you better talk to the fire marshal. He's going to need a bigger truck.
Is it on your wish list?
He's got to get the one he's got ordered first.
Is there anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing as none, we'll close the second hearing of the public. Do we have any training tonight?
No, but I'm gonna plan for some next week or next month. That's good for you.
As long as you don't give any homework.
Okay, no homework. Well, okay.
No homework.
Okay, no homework.
All right.
Other than reading the packet, okay.
All right, moving on to commissioner comments. Ms. Holman. Fire Marshal.
What I was projecting to say about the parking is it doesn't matter how many spots, it's based on the size of the building, the occupancy, and whether it's suppressed or not suppressed. And so, what I was trying to get at was, she's limited to 100 personnel, doesn't matter how big her space is. 100, that's it. And that's what I was trying to get at. Her parking may have been less than what those 27 spaces that she had. It may have been less, and that's what I didn't. I know, that's what I was trying to get across it. She was limited. And also then,
Mr. Albright?
Mr. Chairman, other than say congratulations to both you and Mr. Broll.
Mara?
Yeah, congrats, for sure. This is great momentum. I thoroughly enjoy my East Point Planning Commission meetings, so thanks for having me.
Commissioner Naylor?
Congratulations to the both of you for continuing to lead us. I think we're on the brink of some good stuff, and we'll just keep asking. And some of those other concerns, a lot of community benefits can come into play when developers come. We'll just keep reaching for those that have deeper pockets and can bring those things that we would need, such as the new fire truck for the 10-story. Thank you.
Commissioner Lalonde?
Other than, congratulations to both of you, I have no comment.
Oh my God, why can't I pronounce your last name? Munez. Commissioner Munez.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Our new chair and vice chair. And I just appreciate the wealth of knowledge that is on this dais, and I look forward to learning more from you guys.
Commissioner Ulinski.
Congratulations to you both. I'll take my pay after the meeting. I'm kidding. So joking. Mara, I love your energy. I know I tell you all the time, but I love it.
Thank you. I like you guys a lot too.
Vice Chair Broll.
The only thing I would just kind of reiterate what we said earlier, thank you, Tim Palazzolo, for being the chairman. Doing a great job. That's all I have.
So you'll have to bear with me as I find my sea legs. Hopefully won't do anything horrific. I'm trying to be nice. I need to also give a great kudos to Tim. Getting that text message from him was kind of a bit of a gut punch. Was unexpected. And people like that you just don't replace too easily. So great respect out to Tim. It's a beautiful night. There's very little power going on in the city of East Point. It's a little bit better than what it was. But go home and enjoy your night. Sit out on your porch or go have a cocktail. Thank you. We are adjourned. Oh, shit.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Said I was trying to be nice. Thank you. Leo made the motion. Stacy supported.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Ms. Munoz, Mr. Broll,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Ms. Ulinski, yes. Chairman Pellis,
Yes.
Chairman Dawes.
Yes.
Did it. There you go.
Love you, Tim.